Have you ever felt like you're the one constantly reaching while someone you care about keeps pulling away? One moment they're affectionate, the next distant, distracted, or completely shut down. You start second-guessing yourself, replaying conversations, wondering, did I come on too strong? Should I back off? Am I the problem? If you've been caught in a push-pull dynamic with an avoidant partner, you know that aching confusion. You know the anxiety of waiting for a reply, the silence that feels like punishment, and the slow erosion of your self-worth as you overcontract in the hope of keeping the relationship alive. But you're not needy. You're just craving safety in a place that can't offer it. And here's the truth most people don't tell you. As long as you're available for their inconsistency, the cycle will continue. Everything changes the moment you stop chasing. Because the real shift doesn't happen when they suddenly wake up and meet your needs. It happens when you stop abandoning yourself to be chosen. What actually unfolds when you become emotionally unavailable to someone who fears closeness? That's what I'm unpacking in this video, and trust me, it's not about manipulation or playing hard to get. It's about stepping back with clarity, standing in your worth, and finally ending the loop that's been draining your energy. I'm Jim Rohn, and I help people like you break free from emotionally unavailable dynamics by creating grounded, secure boundaries rooted in self-respect. If you're ready to stop walking on eggshells and start showing up with emotional authority, hit that subscribe button. This channel is where you learn how to detach with dignity, communicate without chasing, and start showing up for yourself. Because the second you stop being available to avoidant behavior, everything changes. There's a quiet kind of heartbreak that comes from always showing up for someone who never really meets you there. You send the first message, you rearrange your plans, you make space for them over and over again, even when they don't ask for it, because deep down, you're hoping they'll finally choose you the way you keep choosing them. And just when it seems like they might, just when the connection starts to feel real, they slip away, not loudly, not cruelly, just enough to keep you guessing, and it wears on you, not just emotionally but mentally, because you start wondering if maybe it's you. Maybe if you were just a little less available, more mysterious, more detached, they'd finally commit. But here's the truth most people never hear. It was never about doing more. In fact, the most powerful move you'll ever make with an avoidant partner isn't chasing, it's stepping back. See, avoidant individuals struggle with closeness. They long for intimacy, but only in ways they can control, when it's safe, when it doesn't demand too much vulnerability. And as long as you keep showing up without boundaries, they never have to stretch themselves emotionally. You become their comfort zone, present, consistent, forgiving, and they learn they can come and go without real consequence. But everything shifts the moment you decide you're done being their emotional landing pad, not because you want to punish them, but because you finally acknowledge that your energy deserves to be met, not tolerated. And when you pull your attention back, something unexpected happens. They notice. They feel the absence of your steady presence. And now, for the first time, they're confronted with the cost of their emotional avoidance. You're no longer cushioning the discomfort. You're no longer making it easy for them to stay distant without losing you. And here's the part no one tells you. Whether they step up or disappear, you win. Because you're no longer pouring into a dynamic where your devotion is taken for granted. You stop feeding a bond built on ambiguity. And in that space, you start attracting something entirely different. Someone who chooses you clearly, not cautiously. Avoidant partners often present themselves as independent, low mental, even emotionally mature. But under that polished surface is usually a deep resistance to the kind of intimacy that requires emotional availability and mutual effort. That resistance doesn't always show up in obvious ways. Sometimes it looks like them being incredibly attentive in the beginning, making you feel seen, special, even safe. But as soon as emotional depth enters the picture, when real vulnerability is on the table, they begin to pull back. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. Late replies, vague commitments, conversations that never go deeper than surface level, or the sudden busyness that always seems to show up right when things get real. And if you're emotionally invested, you'll likely start making excuses for their behavior. You'll rationalize their distance by saying they're stressed, they've been hurt before, they just need time. And while those things may be true, they don't change the reality. Their pattern creates emotional instability. You feel like you're constantly adjusting yourself just to keep the peace, carefully managing your words, minimizing your needs, hoping that if you're just easy enough, they'll finally feel safe enough to stay. But that's not connection. That's emotional self-abandonment dressed up as patience, and you deserve better. Most people don't realize that emotional avoidance doesn't come from a lack of feeling. It often comes from too much emotion that was never safely held. For many avoidantly attached people, closeness didn't feel consistent or comforting growing up. It felt conditional, overwhelming, confusing. So, as adults, they develop a strategy. Keep people just far enough away that they can't hurt you. This isn't a conscious decision, it's more like a reflex. Even when they care deeply, there's always a part of them that stays hidden. They crave connection, but it terrifies them. Love, for them, feels like pressure, like expectations they're destined to fail. So instead of leaning in, they lean out. Not because they don't want you, but because they don't know how to stay open when vulnerability feels threatening. And this is where things get complicated. Because if you're someone who's wired to connect, who finds comfort in emotional closeness, this behavior doesn't just confuse you, it hurts you. You might find yourself constantly wondering, why won't they let me in? Or what did I do wrong? But here's the thing, it's not about what you did. Their retreat has more to do with what intimacy awakens in them than anything you said or didn't say. And yet, even knowing that, your instinct may be to close the gap, to try harder, love louder, show up more. But for someone who sees emotional pursuit as a threat, this often backfires. The more you try to move close, the more they move away. Not out of malice, but because they've come to associate emotional engagement with losing control. So what you intend as love, they experience as pressure. And what they call space, you experience as rejection. It creates a painful mismatch, one that slowly chips away at your self-esteem because no matter how much effort you give, it never seems to land. And over time, their inconsistency starts to make you question your own worth. When you're always emotionally available to someone who isn't, you unintentionally reinforce their comfort zone. Not because your love is wrong, your loyalty and effort are beautiful qualities, but in this dynamic, your steadiness becomes expected rather than appreciated. They learn that you'll still show up, even if they don't. You'll reach out first, you'll adjust, you'll carry the emotional weight of the relationship, and while you may believe that this consistency will eventually help them feel safe enough to open up, it often has the opposite effect, because without any real consequence to their emotional withdrawal, they're never asked to confront it. There's no discomfort driving growth, no pressure to self-reflect, and if nothing needs to change for them to keep receiving the benefits of your connection, why would they change? Avoidant strategies work because they allow the person to maintain control and autonomy while still receiving care and intimacy through your efforts. You end up doing all the emotional heavy lifting while they stay at a safe distance. And slowly, something in the relationship starts to shift. It stops feeling mutual. You find yourself thinking too much about what to say, hesitating before expressing a need, waiting for them to initiate and rarely seeing it happen. The entire relationship orbits around their pace, their capacity, their comfort. And because avoidantly attached people often lack awareness of this imbalance, they may not even realize how much they rely on your emotional labor to keep things going. They don't see how your endless effort masks the lack of real emotional reciprocity underneath. And that's where the dynamic becomes not just frustrating, but unsustainable. Because the more you give, the less grounded you feel. You're not in a relationship, You're in a rescue mission disguised as love. Sometimes, without even realizing it, you start sending a message you never meant to send. When you're always there for someone who constantly keeps their emotional guard up, what you're really saying, without words, is, "I accept this." You might think you're being patient, loyal, understanding, but over time what actually happens is this. Your consistent presence starts to signal that their inconsistency is okay, that they don't have to try harder, that they don't have to show up differently. And that's how you get stuck in this loop where you're silencing your own needs just to keep the peace, hoping that if you're loving enough, steady enough, available enough, they'll eventually feel safe enough to fully choose you. But here's the hard truth. No amount of emotional availability on your part will ever fix someone else's fear of closeness. Avoidant patterns don't change because of pressure, and ironically, they don't change because of unconditional closeness either. The thing that most challenges avoidant behavior is space. Not punishment, not ultimatums, just space. When you take a step back, when you stop filling in every gap and stop being the emotional glue holding it all together, they are forced to actually feel the discomfort they've been avoiding. And only then do they reach a real crossroads, grow into the intimacy or let it go. But that decision can't happen while you're still cushioning every moment of disconnection. Let me give you an example. Imagine someone who constantly dips in and out, responding to your text days later, canceling plans last minute, never quite opening up, and each time you let it slide. You tell yourself they're just overwhelmed, you try to be understanding, but deep down you feel neglected. Resentment starts to build. Yet you keep showing up, hoping that your love will eventually melt their walls. The problem? You're doing all the emotional work and they never feel the impact of their own avoidance. There's no reason for them to reflect or change, because nothing really changes for them. You're still there, you still text, you still care, so the cycle continues. Pulling back isn't manipulation, it's self-respect. There's a big difference between trying to control someone's response and protecting your emotional well-being. When someone consistently avoids closeness and you continue to pour energy into that without limits, it's not noble. It's self-abandonment. And eventually, the cost of always being available to someone who resists connection becomes too high. It drains your confidence. It fogs your clarity. It knocks you off balance. Stepping back is how you reclaim that. Not to punish them, not to teach them a lesson, but because you matter too. Your presence, your emotional energy, your capacity to care, those are valuable. And if someone can't meet you halfway, then maybe they're not ready for the kind of relationship you deserve. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop showing up in places where you've been slowly disappearing. You've already given so much. You've been patient, you've adjusted, compromised, waited. You've held space for someone who keeps you at arm's length, thinking maybe one more kind gesture will get through to them. It's a hopeful thought, but it's also what keeps you stuck. The truth is, avoidance isn't softened by kindness, it's challenged by reality. And sometimes, the most powerful wake-up call you can give someone is your absence, not out of spite, not to manipulate, but because continuing to stretch yourself in a one-sided dynamic just keeps the imbalance going. Avoidant people don't do well under pressure. The moment they feel emotional intensity or expectations, their instinct is to pull back even further. But here's where it shifts. When you step back without drama, no blame, no ultimatums, just calm distance. That changes the dynamic entirely. You remove the emotional safety net they've grown used to. Now they're not reacting to your needs, they're sitting with their own emptiness. And that space? It can be uncomfortable enough to spark real reflection, because for once, no one's rescuing them from the emotional cost of their detachment. But even more importantly, your step back shifts the focus back to you. You stop measuring your worth by how much you can tolerate and start honoring what you deserve. Your energy begins to speak for itself. I'm no longer available for relationships that make me feel invisible. That kind of shift is powerful. It's not about withholding love. It's about offering it to yourself first. And when you lead with that kind of self-respect, you naturally stop chasing people who won't meet you so convincing and start allowing the right person to step forward. Sometimes your absence says what your presence never could. When you've always been the one showing up, checking in first, holding space, staying emotionally steady, it's easy for someone to start seeing that as a given, especially someone who struggles with emotional closeness. Avoidantly attached people often don't even realize how much they've come to rely on your consistency. You make it easy for them to stay at arm's length because you do the work of holding the connection. But the moment you step back, everything changes. You stop reaching first. You stop trying to fill the silence. And suddenly there's a space they didn't expect, a gap that feels unfamiliar, even unsettling. That change doesn't go unnoticed. For someone who's used to you always being there, your absence isn't just silence. It's a mirror. It reflects something they've been able to avoid for a long time: emotional accountability. People with avoidant tendencies often disconnect the moment intimacy starts to feel too real, not out of malice, but out of self-protection. They retreat to avoid the risk of getting hurt, overwhelmed, or needed. And when you're always there, ready to soothe or fix the rupture, they never have to question that reflex. Your presence becomes their buffer, but when that buffer disappears, when you calmly stop carrying the emotional weight alone, they're left with themselves. No one's chasing, no one's cushioning the distance, and that stillness, that empty space, often brings discomfort they're not used to sitting with. They may feel uneasy. Some will withdraw further. Others might pause and start to reflect. Either way, you get something incredibly valuable: clarity. Not because you pushed for answers or demanded change, but because you created the space for the truth to reveal itself. And sometimes your quiet absence says more about what you need than all your words ever could. Clarity is everything when you've spent too long in emotional limbo. When you've been caught in the loop of guessing what someone feels, overanalyzing every silence, and trying to earn love through effort, it's easy to confuse uncertainty with chemistry. But the moment you step back and stop showing up in the same over-available way, the dynamic shifts, and that shift is what finally tells you the truth. Because if someone genuinely values you, your absence won't be met with more distance. It will be met with presence, maybe not perfectly, maybe not immediately, but it will be felt and responded to with effort, not more silence. And that's the difference you start to see so clearly when you stop leading the emotional charge. You begin to notice who just misses the comfort of your effort and who truly misses you. And those two things are not the same. The right person won't make you beg for clarity or shrink yourself to keep the peace. They won't keep you spinning in doubt or questioning your place in their life. When someone is emotionally ready, their consistency speaks louder than their charm. You don't have to keep proving your worth, translating their mixed signals, or dimming your needs to feel safe. You get to be whole, you, fully, and they meet you there with openness. For someone who's been wrapped up with an avoidant partner, this kind of stability might feel strange at first. It might even feel too easy, because you've been trained to believe that love has to be earned through emotional work. But love isn't a chase. Real connection doesn't ask you to work for scraps of attention. The right person won't be intimidated by your need for closeness. They'll welcome it because they want the same thing. They're not afraid of the parts of you that require care, presence, or honesty. They're not trying to escape intimacy. They've done the work to show up for it. And when you experience that kind of mutuality, it stops feeling like survival. it starts feeling like home. When you're in a connection with someone who pulls away every time things get real, it's easy to start believing the problem is you, that maybe you're too emotional, too available, too much. But the truth is, you're not too much. You've just been offering your heart to someone who isn't emotionally equipped to hold it. And that's not a reflection of your worth. That's a reflection of their capacity. There's something powerful that happens when you stop trying to hold together a relationship that only moves forward when you push. When you stop chasing breadcrumbs of affection, when you stop twisting yourself into someone who's easier to love, you create space for something different, something healthier. You begin to wait, not from fear, but from strength. You wait for someone who meets you fully, someone who brings peace, not confusion, someone who gives, not just receives. It's not about waiting for perfection, it's about recognizing emotional maturity. And once you've experienced what it's like to feel emotionally safe with someone, to not have to earn their attention, to not feel like you're constantly on trial, you won't ever want to go back to guesswork disguised as love. So if you've been stuck in a loop with someone who gives you just enough to keep you hoping but never enough to stay, it's time to come home to yourself. You don't have to convince anyone of your worth. You don't need to perform emotional gymnastics to be chosen. When you stop overgiving, stop overreaching, and stop holding emotional space for someone who won't meet you halfway, you step back into your power. You send a clear message. My love is not a consolation prize, it's a gift. And it belongs with someone ready to receive it fully. The moment you stop showing up for someone who avoids connection, everything starts to shift. Not because you're playing games, but because you're finally honoring new rules. Rules that say you no longer abandon yourself in hopes of being chosen. From that place, love becomes less about proving and more about aligning. Less about surviving emotional distance and more about building emotional closeness that's mutual. So protect your energy, trust your instincts, and remember, the right person won't need to be chased. They'll meet you right where you are without hesitation because they'll want to. As we wrap up, I want you to take this with you. Your emotional availability is a strength, not a flaw. But it only thrives in a space where it's respected, not taken for granted. Today we talked about what happens when you stop overextending yourself for someone who keeps you at a distance. How stepping back isn't about playing games, it's about honoring your emotional needs and creating space for clarity. You deserve a connection that feels mutual, grounded, and safe. You deserve someone who doesn't leave you guessing, someone who meets you in the middle. Not because you convince them to, but because they want to. Thank you so much for watching. If this video spoke to you or helped bring you a sense of clarity, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and share your experience. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos on healing attachment patterns, setting boundaries, and building healthy love from the inside out. Remember, your heart is not too much. It just needs to be met with the right kind of presence. See you in the next one.